Oh, snap. It's Friday, and we are 18 minutes away from the wonderful hour of 420. Folks, we've got a great show for you today. I'll be joined in just a moment by somebody who basically said, to heck with it. I'm going to start selling weed online and delivering it right to the people's doors. Real quick, before we get into that, if you like what I do, you can find this podcast on all streaming platforms and at colememo.com. To support the show financially, head on over to colememo.com/support or become a patron at colememo.com/Patreon. For just $3 a month, you can keep this show going and get early access to my content. Once again, that's colememo.com, colememo.com/Patreon. One of the best ways to support this show is by smashing that like button, especially if you're watching on platforms like YouTube. You can also subscribe, give the show a favorable rating from wherever you're listening from. All those things help way more than you might think. And if you've been curious about getting federally legal cannabis, again, we'll be talking about that here in just a moment, but you can also get federally legal cannabis drinks delivered right to your door. Check out drinkcantrip.com/colememo and you can get 15% off your order. And I'll get that same 15% back as in-store credit, which I'll probably use to buy more drinks. Cantrip's got something for everyone, low dose and high dose options, plus flavors like orange soda, which I have here, root beer, cola, and sparkling seltzers. Again, that's drinkcantrip.com for 15% off of your order of federally legal cannabis drinks and a little store credit kickback that helps keep me stocked. Folks, we'll be right back after this message.
Here in the Midwest, growing amazing food isn't just a hobby, it's who we are. And that's why we created Envy Plant Foods. Whether you're working on a farm or starting a backyard garden, growing hot peppers for sandwiches, or cool lettuce for a chopped salad, Envy has the perfect plant food for you. Blended in Illinois since 1962. Support the Cole Memo and save. Get 10% off fertilizer for your wheat garden at envyplantfoods.com with code CHILL10. Plus, an additional 10% of your order will go to the Cole Memo to help fund the show. Again, that's envyplantfoods.com.
Yes, thank you to the folks at envyplantfoods.com. All right, back to it. Like I said, today joining me is Livi McKay, the someone I mentioned earlier who looked at the current landscape and said, to hell with it. I'm just going to start selling weed online and bring it straight to the people's doors. She's launching a bold new project with her business partner, Dr. Jean Talleyrand, a longtime advocate for medical cannabis who's been in this game since the 90s. Now, folks, if you're tuning in live, drop your comments. We can take your questions and maybe even take a few callers after we cover the main discussion. If you're catching this later and wondering how to join the live streams, I'd say the best way to do that is to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And an easy way to find my YouTube channel is by going to colememo.com/YouTube. Now, this project has already stirred up a ton of attention. After I posted about this stream, plenty of people chimed in with their opinions, questions, and hot takes. So let's get into it for another episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
Livy, welcome back. How's it going?
It's going. No, it's going very well, actually. How's it going for you?
I am just so happy it's Friday. It's been a really long week. It's been a good week. It's just been a long one, you know. I was up in Chicago earlier this week, saw some friends, saw some familiar faces, smoked some weed, you know. But yeah, doing well. Are you also happy that it's Friday?
I am happy that it's Friday. I will say my weekends are becoming fewer and far between. So Fridays and Mondays aren't having much of a differentiation anymore. But but no, things are going very well. And I'm very, to be completely frank, I'm excited where the market is. I'm excited where the opportunities are, but there's no shortage of challenges, and there's no shortage of obstacles ahead. But I am very happy with what we're doing and where we're going with it. So that's kind of keeping me fueled, regardless.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm so excited to talk about what you're doing. But before we do that, can you remind people who you are and how they can connect with you online?
Absolutely. So I'm Libby McKay, the founder and CEO of My Tepi, the creators of the Discover Your Color platform. You can find me, best place to find me is on X at Libby McKay. You can also reach out to us on our website, discoveryourcolor.co, and the connect with us button. And we'd love to, chat with you. And those are probably the best ways to get to us. Oh, wait, no,
Awesome.
I'm so sorry. It's on the marketplace that you can actually reach out to us, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah, so
yeah, I see that now. Got to get past this age verification. Then there's the
yes,
contact button.
yes, thank you.
Um, and we'll have those links in the show notes, folks. So if you're trying to get over there, you can get there, like Livy said, at discoveryourcolor.co. But if it's easier for you, check out the show notes below or at colememo.com, and you'll get there. Now, look, I know this is gonna be like basic elementary stuff, but there are gonna be people that are tuning in that may not know what we're talking about. So I sort of want to set the foundation.
Of
Um,
course.
before you tell us about the new project, can you explain how cannabis became federal at a legal level? Um, in other words, hemp.
Yes, yes. And first, it's very important to know that this is a lot of legal, like a lot of legalese and a lot of legal jargon and landscape and definitions that do not have that have real world applications. But let's start with just the word cannabis, for example. There's no federally legal definition of the word cannabis. There are bills out there that would like to relabel all of marijuana as cannabis, but we don't have that right now. So what we have is we've got federally legal hemp, which is of the cannabis plant. So that is federally legal cannabis, and we have federally illegal marijuana. So the federal distinction between these two is the 0.3% THC, Delta 9 THC, and that's on a dry weight basis. And the Fourth Circuit Federal Court and the Ninth Circuit Federal Court, this was in 2002 and 2024, both ruled that the federal farm bill in 2018 was unambiguous in their language. It was unambiguous in their language that this was legal, that the cannabinoids derived from hemp, from the hemp products, are legal. And when we say hemp products, what we're talking about is a legal framework. We're talking about legal definitions under used licenses and under those types of regulations. But when we're talking about from a scientific perspective, we're talking about cannabis. That's the same plant. And it's disingenuous to say that they're two different plants. They're both the same plant. They're cannabis sativa L. And we do stand that these definitions need to be refined. They need to be refined at the federal level. And we don't think that that hemp needs to be shut down to where it's only fibers or anything like that. That was actually not the intent. Cannabinoids was certainly in there for human consumption, and it was up to the states to regulate it. So cannabis became legal. We need to get marijuana included in that definition so that the above 0.3% THC can be included in that definition and can also become federally legal and enjoy the same benefits like no 280E, interstate commerce, and so forth. And there do need to be more regulations on the cannabis, the hemp side. But there is this path forward, and we're feeling very strong about it because it's here now. When we talk about federal legalization of cannabis, we're like, that happened. Let's protect it and go further and go all the way, not backwards, cutting it out for people like myself that are purchasing it legally and have been for a year now, and not go backwards and make me a criminal or make the people that I buy it from a criminal because it didn't roll out the way that we expected it to. And so that's where we are. That's how it got legalized. And so this is we're in a fight right now. There's certainly an onslaught against the legalized cannabis of the 2018 Farm Bill. Basically, people trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And some of the biggest proponents of this come from the cannabis industry, or I would say the state marijuana programs themselves. And so that's probably the most disheartening part of all of this is that we're not seeing the forest for the trees. We're not seeing that this happened. Um, and I'll be the first to tell you, I didn't advocate on that particular site. Like it was something that was intentional, but how the market grew and how it came to be like it is now, I don't think anyone fully anticipated. But to shut it down would be sending us back decades. Regulating it to where it's safe, tested, and accessible to adults is the way is what we've been talking about for years, for decades. And it's here if we can keep it. I feel like Ben Franklin. We got it if we can keep it.
Well said. Yeah, and I'll put it on the screen right now. We're looking at the 2018 Farm Bill. If you scroll to the very last page, super simple. You can do this at home. Google the 2018 Farm Bill. Scroll to the last page. I'm talking the last page, folks. Check it out. It says, and this is what it would look like, by the way, if we descheduled the entire cannabis plant. We would make conforming changes to the Controlled Substances Act. And basically, like you explained, it's unambiguous. In other words, it's very clear. Look, we can read it in plain English. Tetrahydrocannabinol, aka THC, is Schedule 1, except for THC in hemp. Very clear, very clear. And like you said, the other part of the definition that I didn't just display there is that, and the difference I would say between the 2014 Farm Bill, between the 2018 Farm Bill, is that the 2018 Farm Bill dropped the industrial prefix that was present in 2014, and also, as you stated, added a host of consumable cannabinoids. And I think during our last conversation, you had mentioned that maybe part of the inspiration behind adding consumable cannabinoids was one Charlotte Figge. Am I remembering that correct?
That is correct. She did have a major part to play in that. This was meant to be consumables. This was meant to be consumables. And if the government was going to shut this, the courts were very clear. They said the bill is clear. And so if you want to shut this down, Congress needs to shut this down. And Congress has been unsuccessful in shutting this down. Now, everyone wants to scream corruption and lobbyists, as if every industry doesn't have some type of corruption and lobbyist. First off, every industry has lobbyists. But they're not seeing, again, the forest for the trees, that people are buying these products because they're working. And if you didn't believe me before, my gosh, go follow the Texas Hemp Council. And there are two big ones to follow on if you want to go see a bunch of it's the Texas Hemp Council and the Texas Hemp Coalition. Those are two no, Texas Hemp Business Council, that's it. And the Texas Hemp Coalition. They have video after video after video of mostly people, the vast majority are 55 and up, talking about how they're using these hemp-derived products, these cannabis products in Texas, and that they've been using them for years, and they help them with sleep, they help them with pain, they help them with all the things that we know cannabis helps with. And so this is now no longer my story. This is millions of people are benefiting from these products. And it's very arrogant, I believe, to say, oh no, you're not, or you don't know what you're benefiting from, or you don't know how bad you have it. Let me take that away from you and let me give you something else because I know what's better for you. It's a wildly arrogant stance to take when you have, just like I said, testimonial after testimonial after testimonial of people benefiting from the products that they're legally buying off the shelves. And we have people, 5 states away going, yeah, well, hemp tried to shut down, or hemp shut down A3 in Florida. So therefore we're just going to go shut it down all over the country. It's very vindictive. It's nasty. And I have to check myself I actually have on my whiteboard, do not get mad. And because it's every day I have dinner, my team looks at me, we're like, have we checked that today? And I'm like, nope, I've got mad. So we're still waiting to check that box. But I just, because I think that we're missing what this is all about. This is not alcohol, like we talked about last time. It's not alcohol. This is not tobacco. This is something that makes people's lives better. This is healing people. Don't forget that. Do not forget that. Do not let yourselves be deviated by that. And if you say that, then be for regs, not for bans.
Well said. Well, to just solidify our foundation here, and then we'll move into your announcement. We'll talk about what you're doing here. Like you said, 0.3% Delta 9 THC.
Yeah.
And what some folks don't understand by total product weight or by dry weight,
Dry
I might
weight.
be by dry
Mhm.
weight. Thank you. Some people might be wondering what that means. So let's first start off with this drink, which again, you can get at drinkcantrip.com/colememo. Some people might look at this and say 50 milligrams of THC. How is that 0.3%? Well, you have to understand that, and I'm going to display a graphic here that might make it, I think this helps. This graphic is by comic artist Brian Box Brown, who you can find at boxbrown.com. And I think this is a really good graphic. It basically shows a gummy that has, a portion of the gummy is THC, but most of it is cornstarch, sugar, gelatin, and even CBD. And as a result, that meets the definition of hemp. So to bring it back around to this drink, yes, it has 50 milligrams of THC, but also it has other things inside of it rather, like sugar and other things. And so this total level of THC is still under that 0.3% threshold. Also, folks, in case you didn't know, flower, the stuff that you smoke, like the cannabis plant doesn't naturally produce high levels of Delta 9 THC, or what we mostly just call THC. And that's why you generally smoke it, or you vape it, or if you're making brownies, you decarboxylate it, because you have to convert the THCA cannabinoid to the THC cannabinoid by way of heat. So I think we pretty much set our foundation there, unless you have anything else to add.
No, you said that perfectly. That's a great segue.
Sweet, sweet. I guess just to acknowledge one of the comments, Thomas says the
Yes.
other difference is hemp is grown under a USDA or state hemp program. Marijuana does not have a federal program. And I think one last thought that I had to round out a thought that you started off with is that we're talking arbitrary terms that have been defined by law, whereas cannabis is a word based in botanical science. So these,
Correct.
yeah, so marijuana and hemp are, let's just think of them as human-made words. Even though
Yes.
science, we won't get into that philosophical rabbit hole here, but science, by the language of science, it is cannabis. And so exactly, Daily Homegrown says this is what happens when people who don't understand the plant make the rules. And with that, I think we can segue to your new project. And we actually did get a question about your project. Maybe this is a good way to kick it off. They said, wait, did you just say Dr. T was her business partner? What a powerhouse to partner with. Tell us what you and Dr. T are doing.
That is correct. Dr. T and I have actually been partnered, oh gosh, over 2 years now. And we built this Discover Your Color platform. So what's the original offering, and what's our core offering, I should say, is our Discover Your Color platform. It's a B2B, and then so business to business platform that essentially helps cannabis companies understand what it is that they have based on the COAs. So we look at the COAs and we classify the plant. We categorize the plant, and then we overlaid that with 30,000 consumer reports. And so think of this like chemistry clusters overlaid with consumer reports. And then we have the top reported effects were then discovered, and then we correlated the colors with those top reported effects. So yeah, if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see how it works. So yes, right here, this is where, so it came into the 4 major clusters. And so again, these are the colors. The best way to think about it are different chemistry clusters. And so each chemistry cluster, it does correlate with, again, top reported effect, but not everybody is going to have that effect, as we know with cannabis. And so what it is we say, discover your color. So most people, yellow is going to be energizing. It's going to help you be creative. Green's going to help you be focused. purple is going to be calm, blue is going to be rest. And however, if you fall into that 1/3 category where yellow happens to make you sleepy, and that is the color that you are, that is the effect you are looking for, then you can reliably go back to yellows for that desired effect every time, because the chemistry underneath that color never changes. And so that's our core offering, is to bringing science, bringing validity, objectivity to the wild world of understanding cannabis products and what it's going to do to you. So that's our entire service, is actually focusing that out and then turning that into very easy to understand iconography, as you can see here, where it's, you've got the energize, and then the mind body balance that represents type 1, type 2, type 3. So high CBD 1-to-1 to high THC categories there. And so this is a way for us to apply. We're consistently refining this. We've got some things coming down the pipe that will help people understand not only what their color is, where this is going to affect their body, but we are going to be coming out with a intensity. So actually a true type of intensity scale, as well as a quality grading that will come out. And again, this is all based primarily on what we find in the COAs and some objective measures. And then of course, everything, we do have a subjective element to it as well. So once we see everything in the objective, then of course we try it out and we try to see if the data matches. So everything we do has a very systematic approach in helping people navigate the world of cannabis, whether you're in California or North Carolina. And we do have clients in both.
That's so awesome. Just really quick, you mentioned that sometimes I guess the thought that came up, you said some strains might make, or selections, varieties, however you want to refer to them, they might make somebody sleepy versus another, that same one might make somebody really energized. To use an analogy, is that like when you give somebody who actually has ADHD medication, and it like calms them down, versus if you give that same medication to somebody that doesn't actually have ADHD, it gets them all, stemmed up, just to use a sort of a crude analogy?
That's actually a very good analogy, because it's, one is set chemistry, and then it's matching with two different variable chemistries. So it's two different people, right? And so that's exactly what we're talking about, is finding your chemistry that matches with the chemistry of the plant that matches with your chemistry.
That's awesome. Brandon says, that's really cool. It's like she made a chart for the process that runs through my head when I smell cannabis.
Oh, you're going to love this. So this all is Dr. Talleyrand's and Dr. John Abrams. They started this back in 2015. Actually, they started it with aromas. So that's actually how this all began, was they got the community out in Northern California to tell us, okay, well, how do you separate it? And they go, we just smell it. And so they were able, basically, they said that it gave them the needle in the haystack. So they were able to know, all right, we have these different chemistry clusters. And then they went and they found what were the actual chemicals in those chemistry clusters that made those chemistry clusters unique. And so they did quite a bit of work on this. So, I mean, this is going on about 10 years in the making of the work on this, to actually find. And so then when we partnered up, we were able to basically put it into translatable information for the public and for operators, and then also build an entire tech platform around it, so that we can help people to actually, more objectively find the products that they're looking for.
That's so cool. That is so cool. So once again, folks, if you go to discoveryourcolor.co, I think if I just hop up here and hit marketplace, is that how I get my cannabis?
This is how you can get your cannabis if you're in a state that we can deliver to. So I wanted to, it's so funny. When you said, we just said to heck with it and started selling weed online, I cringed so hard, because
Oh no.
I know, in such a good, no, in a good way. I just say, because this is something that, this was always what we intended to do. We were always going to build a B2C platform that was going to make finding the right cannabis for you easy. This was my original intention 5 years ago when I came out and started to do this. And so we always wanted to, but we were starting, we started slow, methodically started working with a lot of B2B clients. And this doesn't even represent, this is on where we actually deliver, not our client base. But when we looked at the hemp, when I got into, I want to first explain why I got into hemp, and then I want to get into this. So
Sounds good.
why we pivoted to start to, I won't say pivoted, why we expanded to include hemp, because we've been exclusively in the cannabis space up until last year. And then we expanded and started to include the hemp guys. And that was because, again, as I'm someone who uses cannabis daily to treat seizures. I haven't had a seizure since 2016. I do have daily chronic pain that is pretty severe and incurable in a lot of ways. And so this certainly helps me to be not on the 90 Percocets I used to be prescribed to a month. This allows me to have a daily life, but I've had to buy from the illicit market. I no longer have to. And that's when it started to dawn on me that I would be quite a hypocrite if I'm buying from people that are legal, that want to do better, and I'm advocating to get them shut down instead of using the business that we have to help improve operators in state marijuana, in marijuana states. Why would I not do that extend that same service to my neighbors, to the people down the street from me that I go and get coffee with? That seemed wrong on a lot of levels. So we did tweak our service a bit to include hemp operators, and a part of that service is actually improving these standards or getting them to standard. Our first hemp client, he thinks of us as a regulator. He actually tells me, he's like, I'm not DYC compliant. That's what he'll say if he's not getting things right. So, excuse me, I've had a terrible, nasty cough I haven't gotten rid of for a couple of weeks. Excuse me. So we have so we've not only instilled the color protocol, which changes all the markets, but we also have instilled a protocol for hemp operators where we require full panel testing. We absolutely tell them that if it is anything but THCA and Delta 9 and CBD and CB, basically naturally occurring, it pops up in our system as synthetic, a big red icon. However, we do want to study these things. And I'm learning that as I'm getting more and more into this market, because I'm meeting people that are benefiting from things like Delta 8. They say Delta 9 is too strong for them. We know Delta 8 is less psychoactive. And we know people are really benefiting. So while our system says we don't have enough information to say one way or another, we do declare these as semi-synthetics. We are absolutely open to studying them and and evaluating a safety profile, evaluating a safety index, and evaluating the right dosings and the same thing that we've been doing, and see if there is therapeutic potential here. That's something that we certainly are open to. So that's just a little aside. But for us, what you saw with the Tailored Craft Cannabis and on our marketplace, so the DYC marketplace, what we are doing, so we still are a technology company. We don't touch any of the flower. We don't handle fulfillment. We just work with third party operators, and we only work with their, again, full panel tested, all natural. And you'll see that we have stringent age gating. We are not about to start selling to anyone young. We even get a little notification on our back end when like a license is rejected and all of these things. So we've put in the correct guardrails in place. We're watching the laws very carefully, making sure that we're following the state laws as well as the federal laws. We are not here to try and cut corners, anything that we've been pretty much accused of. I've been in this game for a hot minute now. I'm certainly not trying to cut any corners. I'm trying to build what I've always been trying to build, which is how do we build a technology platform that gets everyone in the cannabis community speaking the same language, from cultivators to consumers, so that we actually know what things are going to do to people. So yes, so we do color code. We offer the boxes. We do have these partners that, like I said, they've got some of the highest quality flower that I've found as well and that's another big part. We only work with premium wellness, high end. We're not trying to just sling product. We're not trying to just sell as much as we can. We're trying to actually carefully curate and craft a what will eventually be a full wellness market that's going to have, right now we have flower, but this is going to be quickly expanding to tinctures, into edibles. But our tinctures will be, we actually have already started working on making sure that the dosing is correct, that they have the right amounts in there, that it's actually got the CBD that you think is in there, because that's a big problem. And then our edibles, when we bring those on, that we won't have anything that has high fructose corn syrup or preservatives. We will only be carrying truly wellness, organic type of edibles, and not everything is certainly not everything in the psychoactivity, but with CBD, CBG, CBDA, gosh, all of the different types of minors, where we see a lot of potential more going into what we call symptom domain rather than the traditional. So when we've said cannabis is wellness, we meant it, and now we're just acting it out. So that's the new project, is basically this marketplace that is defined by the endocannabinoid system. The products that we bring on will be, again, in that symptom domain. Again, this is a lot headed by, this is why we've partnered with Dr. Talleyrand on this. And but we're also getting more partners. We're discussing with more labs, and we're getting quite serious about this, because it is wellness. This is people's lives. And so we do take this very seriously, and we're going to follow the law.
And we got a question in for sure, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. But I'm just displaying your partners right now. You also mentioned COAs, which there's a link down here at the bottom. Let me make this screen a little bit bigger. And when you click on that, you can actually see the COAs. It looks like I can download them and check them out myself. And then you also, I think you explained to me, you would get these COAs with your purchase. Now, I know COAs get a lot of attention. And with that said, I did recently run a poll and found that most dispensary consumers didn't know you can request a COA in states like Illinois. And the second most common response that I got was that they didn't even know what a COA was,
Correct.
Which seems understandable, because I know we seem to have short-term memory in this space, but mandatory cannabis testing is a relatively new concept, like within the last
Yes.
decade. Based on my online research, Colorado didn't require potency or microbial testing until 2015. So again, that's within the last decade that we had mandatory testing. Can you, just because we kind of zoomed over this, in case people are wondering, we're throwing around acronyms. What is a COA, and what value does it offer to the consumer?
Absolutely. I want to preface this. If we are successful, a consumer, only the most avid consumers will know what a COA is, and the rest, they will just know what a COA does. And that one is had. That is our mission. That you don't have to read this thing. So what COA stands for is a certificate of analysis. And that is they sometimes can be 6 to 12 page lab reports that detail the potency levels, and in a full panel COA, that's the full cannabinoid test. So that's the major cannabinoids, THC, the CBD, the minor cannabinoids, and then terpene testing. And then so that's the potency testing. Then you test for basically harmful things that would be in it, like microbials, heavy metal testing, pesticides, residual solvents, those types of things. And then also one other final that we're going to be making sure is in there is water as a moisture content. Moisture content is the last one to be added in there. It's not on all of them, but we are working on getting that. I'm not sure if moisture content is in this one, but it is. But it does cover everything from, again, from the heavy metals, residual solvents, pesticides, and so forth. What's really important that I want to highlight about this is that these full panel tests are not required. They're not mandatory. So getting these tests, getting operators to voluntarily take on these tests, it's a lot of times 5x the cost of what is mandatory. So it's very difficult sometimes when you're talking to someone that goes, I don't need to do this. You know, I'm only legally required to do potency. And as Cole, you pointed out, we've only been testing cannabis for 10 years and we've been smoking cannabis for thousands of years. So it's very understandable why there's hesitancy, but then also it's another reason why we started the marketplace, because there are operators that are willing to go the extra mile, even when it's not mandatory yet, to show that they're on the good side of business and that they're wanting to make sure that their customers and their consumers know that what they're getting is safe, it's clean, and it's tested. And from our perspective, we want it because we can tell you from a scientific perspective what it's most likely to do to you, or at least help you figure that out and anchor that into with what you have. And if it's just the flower product or you know, what have you, then you're not able to do any of that. And so, yeah, so you can see over here that these are pass. This is the particular report. We're going to be, another big problem, and this is a problem in cannabis, in the marijuana programs, this is a cannabis industry-wide problem, is we don't have standardized testing. We don't have a standardized testing protocol. We don't, some are including tests that we don't need, so it's making it more expensive and so forth. So we are actually on the case when it comes to that. We are talking and working on partnering with labs on how to create the ideal COA, and also help not just make the ideal COA, but also make it an affordable COA so that we can get everyone on an industry standard of full panel COA to make sure that these are, again, safe and tested products.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is super interesting. I know one of the big complaints that some critics have on hemp is the idea of no COA. And I saw on your website that you translate complex certificate of analysis from state licensed laboratories into user-friendly product profiles. Does that mean your the federally legal cannabis products that you have on your show are tested by state licensed cannabis labs? Like, in other words, the same labs that you would get your in-store marijuana from?
Some yes.
Okay.
Some yes. Some are other kind of testing labs. I believe, I don't know if Badger is, I'll have to double check on Badger. There are a lot of labs out there. There are some labs that will be in the hemp, but also will be in like water testing and have other laboratory services, essentially, that are not exclusive. And you'll actually see that in the ones that test with cannabis as well. So labs usually are multi-industry. And so we see that a lot. So we've seen also like with SC Labs. SC Labs is obviously a very big lab in the cannabis space. And we're now starting to see their COAs on the hemp side as well. That's becoming fairly commonplace. So yeah, you see both, but it's not necessary. And as of right now, they're not required to test with a DEA license. That keeps getting postponed. And a lot of why that keeps getting postponed, everyone keeps getting mad about this, but it's not understanding the realities of the economics here. Again, these testing requirements, most of the people in the hemp side of things, and the CBD side of things, that at least that I've met, and I've met quite a few, they started in their garage. They started with their retirement money. They started with their savings. They weren't bankrolled. I have yet to meet one. I haven't met a single one that was bankrolled by any kind of Wall Street fund, be that PE, VC, family office, what have you. They're all started in my garage and grew it. So it started as a small business, grew it into a big business. And so when you're talking to people like that, these people have been counting their every penny from the very beginning because it was never just frankly given to them. And so again, when you're talking about a state level test, the state required test, which could be a potency test that maybe costs them $65, and then you're asking them to pay $750 on a full panel test that's not mandatory by the state. Their customers don't even know it exists. Their customers aren't complaining about it. You can see why that can be kind of a heavy lift.
Yeah.
So, right. So that's why we took it. So we understood that just from a very pragmatic standpoint. Like, you can scream until you're blue in the face, but people have been buying untested cannabis forever. They just recently started buying tested cannabis. So we came in and have been helping solve that problem, talking to labs, working with labs, trying, and I don't want to, and I can't speak too much about the details of it. I will when I'm able to speak more publicly about this and tell you, who and what what the terms are. But what I can say is that we have been working on this exact problem of how do we get the right testing in, but the price down so that it can be affordable for the guys that have been paying, like I said, $60 to $100 on a test. And it doesn't eat just completely into their margins. But also then on not only that, we come in, so that's what we work out with labs, but then Discover Your Color comes in and we give you an ROI on that test. We go, we're going to make this test work for you. And we're going to make it make money for you because we're going to make this interpretable by the consumer. The consumer never has to know what a COA is. The consumer never has to know what a terpene is or a cannabinoid is. That's the beauty of our system, is that you have to know. All we do is we train the bud tenders, we train the operators on how to basically speak in the language of colors, which gets pretty simple. Are you looking for something more energizing? Okay, we steer you towards yellow or green. Are you looking for something more sleepy? We steer you towards blue and purple. If you fall into that one category, don't worry, come back. We'll work down the spectrum. We'll find the color that works for you. Once you find your color, you're great. And then what ends up happening, 90% of consumers, once they find their color, they don't deviate. They're happy they found the chemistry that works with them. So we're able to cut down on a lot of inefficiencies. We're able to really help consumers find what they're looking for without being bombarded with education, more with information. They're able to be informed, educated if they want to be, but informed like they need to be.
Gotcha. And we'll get to some comments here in just a moment. Like you said, though, I just wanted to establish this point. And I read this on mjbizdaily.com that instituting oversight by state reference laboratories is becoming a standard practice for all state regulated markets so that we can address very real issues that exist with cannabis testing. And I'm talking, this would probably apply to both marijuana and hemp, like lab shopping, inflated potency results, quality inconsistencies. And that's why you're seeing initiatives like my home state, who is building, their own state reference laboratory. So just wanted to say that. Now, I don't mean to take take this question for you, but somebody asked, and I'm just using this as a way to plug one of my favorite policy papers that I wrote. They said this, maybe this isn't the question that I was thinking of, but it still applies. They said, this is all based on the assumption that effects are consistent and predictable, but are they? I think you kind of already addressed that. No, and they affect everybody differently. Are they conducting their own analysis for pesticides, mold, fungi, heavy metals, or trusting an outside COA? Your COA covers those topics, but again, not trying to answer questions for you. Do you want to take that one on?
Absolutely. So this is a really good thing to hone in on. Correct that most effects are not going to be consistent and predictable for everyone. What we've been able to find is we've been able to identify very specific chemistry clusters. So chemistry that is unique The cluster is unique. And we've been able to identify that roughly 2/3 of people will share an effect. So for roughly 2/3 of people that have yellows, it will give them a more energetic type of experience. And then for around 2/3 of people, green will be a more focusing, a more meditative, blue will be a more calming, and then purple will be more sedating. Now, again, that's only for about 2/3. For the other 1/3 of the people, they're going to have a different effect. That doesn't necessarily mean the opposite. That just means different. And so that's why we encourage and we really emphasize the color, because the color represents the chemistry, does correlate with the top reported effect. However, if you are someone that falls in that 1/3 category, where yellow makes you sleepy, and sleepy is the effect you're looking for, then you can reliably go back to yellow every time, because the chemistry underlying yellow doesn't change. And you found the chemistry that works for you to deliver the effect that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I won't even say any names unless you want me to, but I've seen other cannabis companies take this approach where they kind of do the color coding thing. So, not. I'm just trying to say that this is um, seems like something that other people are doing. So I did find the question that I was thinking of, and this is where I'll selfishly plug my policy paper. They said, "So what science and testing do they have to back up the idea that these quote chemistry clusters end quote are accurate? Is it just surveying consumers and asking, did it relax you, which is anecdotal evidence?" And I'll let you answer that, but I just want to say that both the hemp and marijuana industries produce and sell novel cannabinoids, even though scientific knowledge about these compounds remain incomplete. Despite that widespread acknowledgement that the science isn't there yet, this concern has not hindered the rapid adoption of state level marijuana laws. The pervasive lack of cannabinoid research affects both industries. And while this gap might be concerning, it's never, and I'm not saying that this person is saying this, but it's never served as a valid justification for banning these products. And I read that off of my policy paper, which folks can find at colememo.com. I'll throw the link in the show notes after the show. It's called The Future of Cannabis and Hemp Policy, Taking the Best and Leaving the Rest. And I think that's what you're setting out to do. But again, any take on this question before we get on to other ones?
Yes, you can actually find our science. So Dr. Talleyrand was published in Advancing Cannabis Sciences using aroma to establish chemotypes. So this is called chemotyping. So this is well-founded science, and how this was overlaid was again, you can go and actually look at our science section. So Cole, if you wouldn't mind pulling up our Discover Your Color, we actually have about an 18-page science section that briefly overviews it. It's on the corporate page.
Oh, okay. Discoveryourcolor.co,
Yeah, discoveryourcolor.co. Yes, and so if you go to the science, and there is a hyperlink down at the bottom of the marketplace, but this does go into the science of it, the classifications, the validations. So actually, into Dr. Talleyrand and Dr. Abrams's research, and it also includes some of their links and the studies that they've also used. So there's quite a bit of science and research. We do use outside testing. We do speak to the labs. We do use only credible labs, and we don't speak to every lab, but we are working on again solving that problem. Lots of problems to solve, but one at a time. And as long as we are finding that they're credible, that they're licensed, and so forth, and that they're certified, then we do accept them.
Yeah. Lots of stuff to dig through here, folks. Go to discoveryourcolor.co and hit that science button and check out the other options that they have. They break it down into problem classification, validation, certification, and more. So definitely check out the site at discoveryourcolor.co. Trying to move down because we got a bunch of questions in. Folks, we have 45 people tuned in, a big show today. So if you've got questions, drop them and we can display them on screen like we've been doing. We can also take callers. I just have a federal cannabis discussion I'd like to have before maybe we open up the phone lines, talk radio style. Who knows if we'll actually get callers. It's been a while. And if folks are considering it, you don't have to turn your camera on, Dank Informer. You can call. I know some people like to stay anonymous. Okay, let's see here. People are just kind of discussing different things. They say it also needs to hit the THC percent to be Farm Bill compliant. Testing makes sense for contaminants and whatnot, but I think the real driver is to have FB compliance paperwork. Yeah, probably, right? Is that
But well, yes, as long as it's below, again, 0.3% THC, and um, as long as the state does not have restrictions against that, and there are a few states that do that, then it's perfectly within the law and and it is compliant. So it is about keeping that. And something that's very interesting is that so this is a problem. A process of heat, obviously decarboxylation that decarbs it and converts it from the THCA to the THC. So they are using old school curing techniques to actually arrest the THC, keeping it cold. They're really working very, very diligently and doing everything they can and I'm talking about the responsible hemp operators, not just our partners, but the ones I've spoken to across the country are doing everything they can to be compliant and to follow the letter of the law.
Yeah, and I think not only following the letter of the law, like what really stood out to me and why I was excited to have you on is that again, there are some critics out there that say, oh, maybe they're hitting that 0.3% threshold, but it's riddled with pesticides and heavy metals and stuff. So that's the value I see of you providing COAs. Somebody's asking, and Genetic Memory Farms, if I miss your question, because you've had a few different posts, I would love to make sure we answer your question. They're saying, my question is that the labs could have been shopped to get a favorable COA, or is that data cross-checked? Any thoughts on that?
I understand the skepticism. We will probably get to that. Right now, we're working with genuinely mom and pop, very small businesses. We've already found that if you're trying to skirt the line, you don't stay in business, and you definitely don't stay in business with us, because we cross-reference who your farms are, who is everything used to compliant, who are you getting the labs with, and most of these guys don't have the resources to lab shop, frankly, to try and get the correct number that they're looking for. They're just staying compliant. There are ways to stay compliant. Actually getting high THC in a plant is not, like Cole said at the very beginning, it's not common to see high THC. We actually see a lot of plants that, if they were grown under used licenses, would be hemp compliant, or Farm Bill compliant, but they're grown under marijuana tests. And they're grown under marijuana licenses, and so they're not Farm Bill compliant. Thomas is bringing up a very good point as well, that Farm Bill compliance starts with pre-harvest tests. Natural degradation of THCA doesn't make flower that passed pre-harvest testing illegal. That is correct. Legality is determined at time of testing, and testing is required 30 days pre-harvest, no earlier, unless the state passes a legislation otherwise. So that thank you very much for bringing in these little nuances, because they're really important to understand how this is all legal and why.
Yeah. And I'm trying to hold back from answering questions myself. So I'll let you go first on this, and if you don't cover the bases that I'll jump in here. But they say that the idea of ignorant consumer who does not understand what they are consuming but just trust the color is suspicious. We should embrace an educated consumer who makes informed buying decisions. What's your take on that question because I don't get the sense that that's what you're saying. But
I am not saying, again, just you have to look at reality, look at the facts. The facts are 90% of consumers, and there are reports out there that back this up. I'm not pulling this number just out of the sky. 90% of consumers do not know what they are consuming. They do not know, nor do they want to know. Just like most people have no idea how Tylenol makes their headache go away. Now, we would like everyone to be educated, but that's an unrealistic request. That's an unrealistic take that everyone is going to be educated. And if you choose not to be educated, that you should, then you don't have the same right to the same product that's going to help you. That's like saying Granny, if she doesn't learn about the entourage effect and how these terpenes are going to affect her, that she's not entitled to the same medicine as the person that wants to learn that. I find that that's ludicrous. That's absurd.
well, and my thing is, it would be one thing if you were just categorizing it as colors, but you are providing that full panel testing that would allow you to learn all of those things and become that.
Absolutely. We are not discouraging education. That's why we provide so much of it. Frankly, you go to our site, and we're very vocal and pretty in depth about our advocacy. We're vocal about our science. There are some links at actually the bottom of the page that also link to Dr. Talleyrand's published work. And so this is a way to, thank you, Brandon. This is a way to actually educate the consumer in what they need to be educated in. And what do they need to be educated in? How is this product going to make them feel? And if it doesn't make them feel the way that they are expecting, what do they do next? And that's the journey that we're taking them on, rather than giving them a science book and saying, go learn this. And then when you figure it out, come back to us and then we'll talk to you. It's a different approach where we're trying to meet people where they are and educate them as much as they truly want to be educated, but still giving them the relevant information they need to make the best decisions for their health. Remember, we always approach this as cannabis as wellness. If you're coming to us looking at how high can you possibly get, we're probably actually not going to be able to steer you in that right direction, because we're not going to recommend that. We're going to say, that if you want to do that, that's completely fine on your own time, but you're probably going to face some pretty, unwanted side effects when you go that route. We're more saying, what are your goals as far as improving your quality of life? Are you trying to relax more? Are you trying to get less stress? Trying to, have more appetite? Are you trying to have less pain? Are you trying to be more sociable? I mean, these are the sort of things that's our approach to cannabis. I understand there are a lot of people that just enjoy lighting up a joint, smoking. I understand that. There are plenty of services out there that, will direct you in that way. We are geared far more towards, how does this make you feel? And if it doesn't make you feel the way that it wants to, how can we help you get to what you need to feel and get to what you're trying to treat, without trying to bombard you with the fire hose of education? What we say is maybe a bit controversial, but we have kind of taken the whole idea of the consumer needs more education, and honestly, the industry needs more education. The consumer needs better solutions.
Gotcha. Well, I think this is a quick question, then we can jump over to our friends on Twitter and open up. Well, I want to cover federal cannabis policy because I think you might have a solid take on it, and then we can open up the phone lines. We're taking callers, folks. We are live. Once again, if you haven't already, smash that like button. You can drop the comments below. I mean, I'm looking. We got 43 people on Twitter, and there's no way that Henry Lou Mencken, I don't even know if I've ever said that out loud, but we did get a little bit of a question in from our friend Henry Lou. But really quick, I think you already covered this. But the question from Genetic Memory Farms is, so they used aroma to establish chemotypes?
Yes.
Cool. Sweet. Okay. So our friend on Twitter, Henry Lou, and we'll display it on our screen, says, well, they're replying to a comment and they tagged me in this. And I said, I'll show this on the live stream. Well, they tagged me right before we went live. So somebody said hemp is a form of cannabis. Duh. Just like there are multiple species of conifers. And Henry Lou says, agree, a subset of cannabis intended from a regulatory framework perspective for industrial uses like rope, fiber, shoes, clothing, etc. Products requiring essentially zero end product regulation because they are relatively inert in terms of potential safety risks. I just, my comment whenever people say that hemp was for industrial purposes, the thought always comes up is like, do you know how our food supply works? Like, that's all mostly created using industrial processes. Also, again, we're talking about arbitrary terms here. Hemp is not a term based in science. And if it was, I think I was talking to somebody about this on Twitter the other day. I think if we were going to go towards like a more scientific vernacular, if you will, I feel like the closest thing we'll get to that or that we have right now is what you mentioned earlier, like type 1, type 2,
That
type
is
3, and
correct.
type 4. I think,
That is
I think the binary of hemp and marijuana is a little, it's almost like, and this is the thought that I shared earlier, and it seems like people are finally catching on to this. But when cannabis first started to be sold in dispensaries, they would say indica, couch, and sativa. That's the energizing thing. When it's like, no, indica and sativa were used as to describe physical characteristics. They were never used; those words were never used to describe physiological characteristics. Because again, it's cannabis, sativa, genus, species. We're talking binomial nomenclature to take people back
Yep.
to junior high biology. And I know that. Look, I actually get the point here. I think a lot, like if you would have asked me even 4 years ago, what is hemp? I may have said, well, it's
Mhm.
like marijuana's cousin, right? It's only used for rope. I will just say, I've been listening closer to music and media lately, and um, and this is coming from a doctor. He said, "We're in the sunshine state where all the bomb ass hemp be." That's Dr. Dre, in California. Knows how to party. I think it's I can't think of the song name right now. Also, and that was meant to be a joke. That was meant to make
Yes.
us laugh. Let me just play a small clip from like the 1990s here. Really, let's listen closely to the words they use.
Most of this week's program is about a common plant, hemp. Hemp is a plant that has been illegal to grow in the United States since 1937. One of the uses for the hemp plant is marijuana. There are also many other uses for hemp, including making paper.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Libby?
I did.
Let's play it one more, just real quick.
One of the uses for the hemp plant is marijuana.
That's from the 90s. Again, these are arbitrary terms, so it's not like that's like a checkmate or anything. But sometimes people say, yeah, do you get the point I'm trying to make? They'll say it's hemp. So
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. But this all becomes, I don't like to play that game
Sure.
because it is a game.
It's
and
kind of moot.
But it's also inaccurate because the Farm Bill was not meant for just non-consumable, is what they're trying to say. That's just not the case. The Farm Bill was absolutely written for the consumption. It was just up to the states to regulate that consumption. That's what that had. And so they did not, they left it up to the states to regulate how that would be consumed. The states started to regulate that. And then states needed to add more regulation. Like we do need a little bit more regulation as the industry developed and evolved. That's a very natural, organic evolution of saying, okay, you made it legal, it grew. Now we need to add some more regulations like that. That's frankly how markets, if we want markets to function correctly, and when I mean function correctly, I mean that they serve the consumer, that they serve the businesses in them, that they serve the industry, that they serve the stakeholders. And so you've got this, and not just the interest of a small few where basically everyone else is collateral damage. That's not a healthy market. That's not a sustainable market. There's a reason that the illicit market has been so pervasive, even though we've seen marijuana legalized in over 25 states for adult use. Why hasn't the illicit market just completely evaporated? Why is it still prevalent in all of these states? Well, it's because you haven't had healthy markets in these states. And why didn't you have healthy markets? Because the people that came in and wrote these laws, they didn't write them so that other people could come in and create small businesses and grow small businesses and large businesses and serve. No, they came in to dominate and control. It's very, very simple. I'm so tired of playing, like, beating around the bush around this. It's not. This is what happened. They looked at this and said, we can make this like alcohol and tobacco, where it's basically 80 to 90% of the entire market is dominated by 4 or 5 companies. And if, we'll start out maybe 10 or 20 of us, but we'll consolidate, and we'll shut the little guy out, and we'll buy legal, and we'll put it all legal. And because we're the legal source and people want to buy legal, they'll buy from us. It was and then we'll get the federal government to be on our side. We'll build it. They'll come. This was all the mindset of come in, build it state by state, incrementalization, like by incrementally putting this in, and by putting it in such a way where you had, yes, limited licenses. The licenses were either very, very difficult to get or very difficult to keep. And again, this is why you're seeing other states just completely erode, or the quality of the product is terrible because you don't have any competition, because it was designed to not have any competition. I mean, so when we talk about the marijuana program, the marijuana framework, as if it's a framework that works. No, it works. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If it works, the illicit market would be a fraction of the size, but it's still raging, and it's still raging in legal states. You wouldn't have to worry about hemp. I mean, people started worrying about hemp when it started doing well. Hemp's been around since as long as the MSOs. That's what other people don't quite understand, is that a lot of these hemp guys have been around as long as Curaleaf. They're the same age.
Yeah. Well,
we just don't think about that.
And now Curaleaf is in hemp. Oh boy.
And now, and now Curaleaf is the hemp company, which is just wild.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you want to call in, you can at colememo.com/live. Again, you don't have to turn on your video. If you want to call in and drop a question, feel free to. But while we see if anybody wants to join us, let's talk a little bit about federal cannabis. Federal hemp movement, rather, and whether or not you think we'll see it. So just a little bit of background for folks. I recently read on Marijuana Moment that a congressional subcommittee approved a bill with provisions to ban. Before I do that, just realized I wanted to make a point off of what you had said. Some of the things you had said just kind of digested. So, like you said, I think you and myself are proponents of what many call the 3-pillar approach, which includes age gating, mandatory testing, and truth in labeling. And that's exhibited on discoveryourcolor.co. Go there now, get your lab tested cannabis. So I, like you said, I think the difference between that approach, which by the way, is the approach that dispensaries take. You go in, you get ID'd, you get lab tested cannabis. We'll set aside the fact that there's a lot of problems with lab testing, because again, that can affect both markets.
Right.
And they should be truth in labeling. And we'll set aside the fact that for example, the Chicago Sun-Times went to Illinois dispensaries and found that 8 of the 9 products they purchased were not labeled accurately. Setting all of that aside, I think the difference between people that are proponents of descheduled cannabis, aka hemp, and people that are kind of vouching for the Schedule 1 marijuana framework is they have a 4th pillar, and it's limited licensing, limited participation. They don't want the prices to get too low. They don't want people to go into receivership like we've seen within the last month with a few MSOs. And look, honestly, if I were in their shoes, as much as I'd like to say that I'd be different, I don't know that I would, because we're talking dollar signs, and dollar signs can really manipulate the way that people think. But I think that
that is the difference in the approach. I feel like people in hemp are advocating for a more open market approach. And that's not to say no rules. Again, 3-pillar
Correct.
approach. It's just that legal participation shouldn't be limited. And I would even add, if it's going to be limited, do it at like at your locality, because I recently went to a local township and they were talking about how they limit the number of smoke shops and bars and restaurants in their town. That's allowed, folks. You don't have to
Yeah.
set
Yeah.
it at a state level.
Yes.
So, and I think that's really the difference. It seems like proponents of descheduled cannabis, aka hemp, believe in the 3-pillar approach, where these people that have kind of bought into the Schedule 1 marijuana framework, they believe in that 4th pillar, which is sort of like limiting participation to prevent competition, to keep prices high. You know,
and to that point, though, is I would say, can we evaluate whether or not that framework is working for you? As you just said, you have companies going into receivership with that framework. So maybe that framework isn't doing you the benefit that you think it is, because you created the same system that's destroying you. And if you let go of the control and operated in a more open market where you were just close to your consumer, you can raise capital, you have access to capital, you have access to branding, you have access to so much more than little guys do. It's like you could dominate in a free open market, but it's like it is just human nature. I understand, because when you let go of that control, that's terrifying, because then you think you let go of the control, you won't have the money. And so that's why I said this is about control and money. And I don't try to say that, and I think you're doing a fantastic job of not trying to be judgmental about that. However, what I'm trying to say is, in 1 week, I talked to 4 companies in the hemp space that were between $50 to $100 million companies. Some of them you've never heard of. And every single one of them grew from being a small business, starting out as a small business without a lot of funding, and just grew it into a $50 million, $100 million business. And they did it, they grew from 2 employees to 3 employees to 100 employees to 300 employees. If that's not the American dream, I don't know what is. I didn't know that the American dream was, go get VC. Like, only in the 2000s has the American dream been raise a bunch of money from a VC and go try to start a startup. The American dream has been start that business in your garage, in your spare room, in your basement, grow it, with 1 employee that shows up, and grow it to 2, then to 10, then to 50. That's what we see in hemp. That's what we see in hemp. My gosh, it's so heartbreaking, because I talk to my guys out in other states, and they're closing doors. They're putting their licenses on hold, like in the marijuana states, because they can't make any money, because they're dependent on the government to do something right. And the government did do something right. The 2018 Farm Bill. Let's run with that. Let's make that actually work for us, instead of, just saying, on the other side of it, it's kind of bananas when you really, really start to think about what we have here and what we could embrace here, and how we could actually look at the government and go, government, you did this, and now we're willing to give you all the money. We're willing to we're willing to regulate it. We're willing to be tax, all of it. You just can't shut it down, because now you have the real power of the people, small businesses. It's no longer the MSO gang against the federal government. You would have the whole country. And then the federal government might actually listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only thing that I get sort of just really confused about with regard to this debate. And you pretty well covered it. But just like, when these marijuana operators are begging for relief from 280E, they're begging for the ability to bank. They're begging for the ability to accept credit cards. They're begging for the ability to operate in red states. And it's like, you have your foot in the door with hemp. Like,
yes.
Let's just open it the rest of the way.
Right. Because they're receptive. You said it right, that the limited licensing that's their 4th pillar.
It's just,
and that might be the pillar that brings them down. honestly, because it crumbles and it pulls out the entire foundation. But because I want to also say something that I don't know. I'm just going to tell you what I know. I was in Raleigh, met with close to 10, a little less than 10 members of the House and the Senate, local House and Senate. They are not oblivious to the market. They call it cannabis, by the way. They know hemp is cannabis. No wool is being pulled over anyone's eyes. They know the market's here. They know what it is, and they also know small businesses are here. They want to protect the small businesses. They don't want to write laws that squeeze them out. There's also next to zero, and I mean this, zero appetite in North Carolina to pass recreational marijuana. Y'all have to understand that. There might be some appetite from the people. I know Governor Stein just said that. But I'm talking about from the legislators that actually have to write it and pass it. There's next to none. The appetite is to regulate hemp as it is, regulate it, not shut it down. And that's including flower. That is including flower. We're even talking about classifying flower as low to mid dose, not high potency. Because when you're talking about high dose THC, when you're comparing what a flower where you're going to get 15 to 20 milligrams per gram when you're smoking it versus a 500 milligram brownie or even 100 milligram brownie for that instance, that's low potency. That's low dose THC when we're talking relative terms here. So, and you also aren't seeing people go to the hospital because of flower. Flower's not the problem. The problem is kids getting a hold of a bag of gummies, eating the whole bag of gummies, which is a problem, by the way, in all legal states with cannabis, because we need parents to keep their gummies away from their kids. And we need manufacturers to come up with actually, make sure this isn't child friendly. Make sure your packaging is good for kids. Like that's the stuff where you could be really responsible. And that happens.
And when you said good for kids, you meant child proofing, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Child proofing, so that kids can't get a hold of it, so that we can actually think about that. Like, how can we be good for the kids? Well, yeah, don't let kids get a hold of it and don't market it to them. And by the way, if you're a hemp operator marketing to children, you should be shut down. If you're selling to a 10-year-old because you can, you should be shut down. Like there's and almost no responsible hemp operator out there says otherwise. Okay. So that's a load. That's a myth out there that the hemp industry just wants to market and sell to your kids. And if you're quoting that as a cannabis industry advocate, did you really just have to pick a page out of Sam's playbook? Like when you're starting to say the same things that Sam says, you might want to check yourself. That's all I'll say about that part. But
yeah, or if you're saying the same things that this guy says.
These are bad actors. These are people who want to kill your kids, and they don't give a damn.
Sorry. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
Lieutenant Dan. Yes, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Exactly. It's going to kill your kids. This is the reefer madness of the 1920s. Like, so if you're buying into this, you are absolutely buying into the very thing that you say that you're against. You are absolutely parroting propagandist type of material, again, especially when we're talking about flower. So in North Carolina, so back to North Carolina, there is an appetite to regulate. There's also something else that I want to just quickly put in there, is that politics is such I've been studying politics for over a decade now, and it is weird. It is a weird place, and it is a weird thing. So there's a huge appetite to regulate hemp in North Carolina. The two bills are 265, Senate Bill 265 and House Bill 607. So those are the bills proposed. It passed with unanimous support in the House. It was going to pass in the Senate until they attached medical marijuana to it, and then it got killed because, again, that word actually terrifies people. So there is tremendous motion to do that. And so the bill was moving through, and then basically the House and the Senate got upset with each other about the budget. something completely unrelated to hemp. And so then that pushed hemp, right? That basically pushed the appetite to pass any other bills. It slowed everything else down. So this whole idea that hemp operators aren't asking for regulations, that's a lie. That is a bold-faced lie. Hemp operators have been asking for regulations for years, specifically age gating, specifically testing, and specifically labeling. So it is an absolute lie that hemp operators don't want that. I know that for a fact. And number two, the reason that these things don't move through has a lot of times to do with things that are completely unrelated, not corruption. This is a Hanlon's razor type of thing, when it can be, don't ascribe to malice what can be explained by stupidity. That's what we're dealing with here. So yeah, how we describe the House and the Senate here in North Carolina is that they're in a bad marriage, sleeping at separate ends of the house, and they won't get counseling. And so that's what we're dealing with, and we're trying to get them to, work together to do stuff for our benefit. So there's a lot that gets assigned to politics by, frankly, people that just don't know what they're talking about. And I say that as someone who's newbie at actually going in and walking into the halls in the local governments, talking to people. It's so different than what you think it is.
Yeah, well said. And we'll start to close out the show here with the federal. What your take is on this federal discussion and whether or not there's going to be a crackdown at the federal level. But real quick, to just play devil's advocate, how do you respond to the idea? And I've heard people, like I've had Charlie Bachtel, the CEO of Cresco Labs, on the show. I've noticed more and more people that, the defense against hemp changes. And I'm not saying that about Charlie. He said that on my show about a year ago, but I'm starting to notice other people are saying what Charlie said, which is that he basically said, he's worried that with the lack of regulation as it stands now, that if something bad were to happen, and I've even seen our friend Anthony Varell say this on the Dales Report, and we'll actually share a tweet from Anthony here in a moment on the federal action. But they've said, if something bad were to happen, people that don't know the difference are just going to ascribe whatever bad happened to cannabis, and that will set the entire movement back. I've got a take on that, but what's your take?
I think it's silly. I don't think that this is going to set the whole movement back, because the whole people know that cannabis itself is safe. And if you're talking about something being unsafe, that's the very argument for regulations not banning. That's the exact same argument that we used on the illicit market, like for the illicit market, but arguing for regulations. Now that it seems like a retooling of that argument to somehow ban these products. And again, I'm sure we're somewhat talking about the semi-synthetics, like Delta 8, HHC, THCP, THCO, all that stuff. Adults have been consuming these for, I'm not a big fan of them personally. I have to be
synthetics, is that what you're talking about? Not a big fan of those.
Semi-synthetics. They're not fully synthetic.
Okay.
So they're not completely derived in a lab. And that is a really important distinction, because we have seen synthetic THC, which is like spice, and those things will be what we call either full agonist or full antagonist. So they really don't work anything like the plant does. And that is a fully synthetic. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing something called semi-synthetics, where they're using a process called isomerization to basically move compounds around to create the different chemicals. And so, like using CBD to basically with isomerization to create Delta 8. That's one example. Again, we are not seeing the slew of we're not seeing a slew of deaths. I'm not saying these things are safe. We actually don't know. We don't have enough information. We need more research. What we do know is people have been consuming them for years. We're not seeing massive surges of hospitalizations. We're not seeing death. This isn't a vitamin E acetate type of issue where we actually had 44 deaths. And I will remind everyone that alcohol kills 6 people a day. So we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that with the semi-synthetics. We do see that THCP is arguably 20 times more psychoactive than THC. So that shouldn't be sold alongside. Like, so we certainly need to clean it up, and we need people to, that's why we could clearly advocate for clear labeling, more research, more studies, so that people actually know what they're consuming. But I want to be very careful about this outrage about terrible products that are, this major the health hazard is overblown. And I say that as someone who takes the health side of this very, very seriously. But we haven't seen these products, we're not seeing them kill people. We're just not. We're not seeing mass hospitalizations. We're not seeing the outcry that you would see, especially compared to other substances.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good opportunity. Wanted to show my new kitten here. Her name's Saoirse, which is it means freedom in Irish, and she doesn't want me to hold her right now, so I'm gonna put her down.
Always show kittens. I'm a crazy cat lady, and everyone on my team knows it. So always show kittens.
But back to your point. Sorry, it was a good opportunity. She was walking around at my feet. This might be a hot take, but I don't think it's unreasonable. We have to remind ourselves that safety is not the point of the drug legalization movement. While it's a nice side effect to have regulations and everything else, the point of this entire movement is cognitive liberty. We should have the ability, and if we want to live, say we live in a free country, we should have the right to explore alternative modes of consciousness, regardless of whether or not they're safe. And we're allowed, like you said, to consume alcohol and do a number of other activities that are not safe. I've got a motorcycle. I could go parachuting next week, and nobody is, basically saying that I shouldn't be able to do that because it's dangerous and, I might die.
Point.
Again,
it's a good point. Yeah.
Again, I'm all for what you're doing at discoveryourcolor.co. Check it out, folks. I think, like I said, a layer of safety is a nice side effect that comes with oversight and regulation. I just want to remind ourselves of the roots of this movement that, it's really unsafe is being thrown in prison. It's not very healthy for you for simply possessing or using your drug of choice. Somebody makes a really good point. Illinois relies on an ignorant consumer. They don't even receive recalls. Do they do recalls? They do recalls, but they keep all of the information confidential. So in Illinois, they don't publish recall data. People will say in Michigan, oh, there's so many recalls. It's like, I would rather have people named and shamed so that people can avoid products, that may not be great.
So absolutely. And I know that you're wanting to, I do want to address the one thing that we keep saying we're going to, and then go back to it, which is the federal, the movement that's come around and about the.
Yeah. Do you mind if I give some background on that real quick?
Absolutely. Please do.
So I recently read on Marijuana Moment that a congressional subcommittee approved a bill with provisions to ban most consumable hemp-derived cannabinoid products that were federally legalized under the 2018 Farm Bill. I also saw that the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America are pushing back on the idea of rescheduling hemp to Schedule 1. And that is what they're doing. That's what would essentially happen, by the way, is that hemp is descheduled and we would be rescheduling it to Schedule 1 if this went the way that some people want to go it. The Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America said prohibition of all cannabinoids is not the answer. It risks sweeping up state-regulated and Farm Bill compliant hemp-derived products that have driven a new dynamic in the market. And on top of that, let me click on this to see the latest post. Anthony Varel said from the Dales Report, which, like I said, great show. If I didn't already say it, I should say it's a great show that showcases the cannabis industry, both hemp and marijuana. He's saying that the odds of the Farm Bill closing down hemp is at 87.5%. I don't know how he came up with that number, but he said, I have been told. He's also said this is by no means something to celebrate. My question is, and it sounded like you were naturally going to go there, what's your take on the likelihood of federal action against hemp?
I was told something that I think is true. It's much easier to kill a bill than it is to pass one. So in order to kill the hemp, they would have to pass a bill. Now, there was so much attention about this, the new language going through the subcommittee, but people tend to forget this happened last year with the same subcommittee. It passed through committee, didn't see the light of day on the House floor. The Wyden bill, also introduced in the Senate, didn't see the light of day. So what that signals is there is not a lot of appetite to shut this down at the federal level. There's a lot of talk about it because it gets people riled up. It gets checks written, gets lobbying dollars flowing. But the appetite to shut this down, I think, is low. And I think that Texas, regardless of what happens with SB 3 in Texas and that Senate Bill 3 that would ban all THC products and absolutely shut down a estimated between $4 to $8 billion market. And let me say this very, very clear. That is not going back into quote unquote, or going back into marijuana. That is not going into your MSOS stocks. That is going back to the illicit market. If SB 3 goes through, that's going back to the illicit market. Their teacup is insufficient. People veterans lose their Second Amendment rights if they go into teacup. It's not happening, people. So this idea of but the backlash has been enormous, enormous. And so if you think it's enormous in Texas, think about what that would look like federally. I just don't think you're going to have the appetite. I think there's far more appetite to regulate than to ban it. And I know that marijuana guys don't want to hear that. They want to hear what they want to hear. Yeah, exactly, Brian. It'll go to the cartel. It's Texas. Exactly. That's where it's going to go. So I think that this kind of backlash, again, the reason Governor Abbott hasn't signed it yet, if he does sign it, it's because this is not easy. Like, this is a really, really significant pushback. And if he does sign it, and if he does cause a major backlash, and let's say he even loses his reelection, or Texas goes purple or something like that, oh gosh, there will not be a politician that touches this, because they would lose the thing they care about. That's their seat. That's their election. You know, that's what they care about. So I personally, look, I watch it and I don't want to be arrogant whatsoever. And I'm getting into this with full eyes wide open. If they shut down hemp, like, I thought about this because I told my team this. I said, look, if they shut this down by the end of the year, why would we get into this? Because our goal is to get people to shop by color, because it's the best way for you to actually get consistency in the effect that you're getting. And so if we can get even 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people shopping by color by the end of the year, then that will be major steps for us. So we're not being naive. We're not being cocky. But all that being said, I don't think it's getting shut down. I don't think that they're going to pass a bill in both the House and the Senate signed by Donald Trump. Like, think about the processes that you'd have to go through here, going into primary season, going into midterm elections, and seeing how unpopular this is. Did you see the 100,000 letters that were rolled into Governor Abbott's office? Did you see the 1.5 million veterans from the WFE or VWF, Veterans of Foreign Wars, their groups, over and over and over again, speak out against SB 3. You think Republicans want that kind of negative attention with everything else they have going on? I'm sorry, you're not reading the room.
Yeah, and my last check, folks, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Donald Trump has only signed 5 bills into law in his term so far. And again, we're only a little bit over 100 days. I don't think we're at 200 days yet, but a little bit over 100 days, and we've only seen 5 bills signed into law. So just, I think that adds something to what you had to say. And
I want to ask you a question about Texas here in a moment, but I just wanted to add a little flavor of nuance with regard to the idea that we will ever shut down the illicit market. Will it be as, if we have the perfect legalization policy, will it maybe be less so? Probably. I think we would agree on that.
Yeah.
But I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge, like, there's still an illicit market for eggs and milk in this country. It's not booming, but there is one. There is one.
So it's not about shutting it down entirely, because you'll have an illicit market, just as you said.
Sure, but like converting people to the regulated, most people go to the store and buy their milk and eggs, but there's, still some people don't.
Most people want 90% of the crime is committed by 5% of the people. So what that tells you, this is what we know. Most people want to follow the law.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. So most people that are even selling weed now would like to do it legally and would like to do it following the law. And you want to talk about your social equity. You want to talk about actually being able to convert the street dealers into illicit markets, which is what every social equity program was about. In addition to minority groups, then you have to lower the barriers to entry, and you have to actually let them compete. And they're willing to do that. And we're seeing that since the used licenses are so inexpensive and the state licenses haven't been exorbitant, we're able to see small businesses actually compete. We're able to see, and if you're not a good guy, I'm so happy to say I've seen this. I've seen guys that are sleazy, that are not good guys, try to come into this market. And because they're not good guys, they do not good things, and people find out about them and they get shut down. Not because they're in hemp, but because they weren't good guys. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. That's what. So if you have the barrier to entry so low, in the sense where you still have regulations, still laws, because the really bad actors aren't going to want to fool with that at all, right? They're just going to go the easiest way out. But if you put in low barrier to entry, some laws and regulations, you'll get good people. You'll get, like I said, the vast majority of people I work with are married couples. I work with veterans. I work with former corporates. Like, I work with a lot of people that are in their 40s and 50s that have actually been in this game for a while, and found relief with the plant. Kind of the reason that you start a business. Like, a lot of people start a business because they like what they're doing. And so I've seen that the hemp regs actually let it function like a real market, like a true market. The marijuana regs do something quasi and weird, where the consumers aren't happy, small businesses aren't able to really get in the game. You're not able to grow, because of all of the capital requirements to even get in the game, and then to stay in the game. And then when you have limited licenses, you keep all the prices high so that you make sure that you cut everyone out. And who ends up losing is everybody, except for a very few small amount of people. And I don't think that's a very good game.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's gotten me, that originally got me so passionate about this subject is, in speaking with a person who's become a friend. I remember I stumbled across his listing back when we first legalized it in Illinois. And the reason I say that in air quotes, you probably already know, but he said he was a defense attorney for cannabis. And I said, "What do you mean? It's legal now?" And he said, "Well, yeah, for limited amounts, but also like home grow still isn't." And we're talking about Illinois. So, but this is pretty well uniformly true across all states. He said, "Look, we basically made a small carve out in the law that says, you can use and possess cannabis as long as you walk on this tightrope. But if you even make the slightest deviation, the criminal law is still the primary enforcement mechanism." And that's what has gotten me so passionate about this, especially in Illinois, where the idea of legalizing it was for social equity. So it's like, okay, so we hand out a limited number of golden tickets, and everybody who doesn't have those tickets, if they continue to sell cannabis, which surprise, people are going to continue to sell cannabis just like they always have. I've got plenty of people that still do. If your only mechanism of enforcement is the criminal law, my question is, how are we going to right those wrongs?
Right.
If the whole goal was to right the wrongs of the drug war, but we're continuing it, it's always kind of stuck out in my mind.
Then we're not really doing anything.
Right. And, this is sort of related, but I'm going to play this clip and I'll try to talk over it here. What we're about to see is a smoke shop that was raided in the state of Illinois, and then we'll start to close down. Police came in because these people were selling hemp compliant with the Farm Bill. And this person reached out to somebody you may know, Rod Kite, who put in a call to the local PD and said, look, what you got is it's federally legal cannabis, and let's see what these police had to do. So you don't often see this. Here they are. They're walking out with bags of cannabis. These are law enforcement walking out of this smoke shop with bags of cannabis. And here's what they had to do after they got a call from our friend Rod. They had to bring back the cash and they had to bring back the product. I think advocates of the past
would say this was a win.
A win. I mean, look at this. Police
this
are bringing.
This should be a win. And yes, Rod Kite, the man, the myth, the legend. Yeah.
Yeah, if folks want to see Rod Kite, I've posted his speech on my channel in the past. If you go to colememo.com and search up Rod Kite. I've also had him on the show a few times. Maybe we'll have to have him back on. Brian Drumbowski says, Texas put the icing on the cake today with the Houston Chronicle article. Wait until you see the cherry on top. Let's get that SB3 veto on North Carolina.
I love it.
And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you before we closed out.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I think whatever happens in Texas, it's a watershed moment in hemp. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely do. And you'll see two of our partners are in hemp. Are in Texas. And we have other, obviously, North Carolina operators. We don't have all of our partners listed on the state, but we do have, like I said, we've got 2 in Texas and 2 here, and at least 2 here in North Carolina. And so that's why we've been so vocal about demanding that Governor Abbott veto SB3. Not just, and here's the real, it is the watershed moment. And the real stick of it is, and I've actually heard almost every single hemp operator in Texas echo this. They're saying, we'll be fine, in the sense of some of them are going to shut down. Some of them, a lot are moving. A lot would move to surrounding states, even North Carolina. That's a hot spot. So they're like, we would be fine. But who's not going to be fine is the veteran, the granny, the chronic pain patient. The people aren't going to be fine. They're going to have to go back and buy, cartel weed. Do you want to talk about not being safe? You want to talk about taking some chances? Like, this is, and just the mental toll and the stress, like it's such a watershed. I love that you said that, because it is. And I get so admittedly emotional about this because it is a bit personal. I think about myself, and I do think about how much relief, just mental relief, I've had since being able to walk into a store and being able to buy it, and just how much I don't have to, how much I can breathe, how much I can just don't have this mental load. And then I think about if it was taken away and I would have to go back. I think about just how much anxiety that induces, because despite what my Twitter trolls want to say, I actually really, really, really like following rules, which is why I tend to know a lot about the rules, is because I really like to follow them. I'm a really stringent person on following rules. When it makes sense. Now, obviously, I'm not perfect and I won't always follow the rules. I always got to disclaim that. But I'm just saying that I am a type of person that genuinely likes to do the right thing the right way, as to the best of my ability as a flawed human, right? And I think that's most people. I think most people are trying to do that. And yeah, sorry, I'm starting to get a little bit tired, but yeah, that's it is that watershed moment. I really, really hope Governor Abbott does the right thing and vetoes this bill. It's the right thing for the people of Texas. Yeah, looks like Governor Stein over here in North Carolina is already picking up that fumble and going, yeah, we'll be here and we'll we'll take it on. And us being in North Carolina, that's another reason why we feel really good about it. It's another reason why I feel confident that it's not getting shut down at the federal level, because these governors are going to call up and going, we're getting millions of dollars of tax money. Do not pass this. Like, there's going to be so much lobbying, so many interests, so much economic interest in this that, and I'm sorry, marijuana guys, it's not all about you. I'm sorry, it's not. It's about the landlords. It's about the patients. It's about everyone that gets into this ecosystem, not just about the cannabis operators themselves either. So yeah, SB3 needs to be vetoed.
Well, we'll close out with this. Once again, discoveryourcolor.co. And I just want to share this short thought because you brought it up, and I'm also feeling tired. It's been a long day, a long week. So we'll definitely close after this thought. If you have something else to share, add on, definitely don't hesitate. But one thing I find interesting about descheduled people in the descheduled space, the hemp space, if you will, they're not saying so let me put it this way. People in marijuana, like you just said, they seem to have this particular attitude. So let's put a fence down. People on the marijuana side, they're saying, this is our side of the fence. You're not allowed on this side of the fence. The people on the hemp side, the descheduled cannabis side, they're saying, I mean, yeah, if you want to come over and compete with us, bring it on. Let's go. Like, nobody was like crying when Curaleaf or GTI or any of these big companies got into hemp. They said, let's go, bring it.
It's exactly right. That should tell you a lot right there. Right there. Yes. And so the last thing I will say, because we did forget to mention this, is for anyone that is listening that wants to go and support our Texas and North Carolina operators and get you some very, very good. I am a picky person when it comes to my cannabis, and this is really quality cannabis. We do have a special discount for Cole Memo listeners. So if you'll also make sure to put this in your notes. So just put in the discount code Cole Memo 15. That will get you a discount for 15% off on your first purchase. One-offs only, not our subscriptions. Sorry, subscriptions are marked down real low, but on one-off purchases, 15% off. Cole Memo 15.
Thank you for giving my listeners a little price break so that they can try your stuff out. Once again, you go to discoveryourcolor.co, use that code ColeMemo15 if you want to check it out. I'll add it to the show notes. You can just copy and paste it, and add it before you check out and get a little price break. So, Livy, thank you. I know it was a longer stream, but did you have fun?
Always. It's always good talking to you. I've been looking forward to this. It was a great way to round out the week.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm excited to see how this all goes. Would love to have you back on if this evolves or, whatever. You're always welcome back on the show. Just reach out. I'm a message away. And folks, happy Friday. Have a great weekend. Go to discoveryourcolor.co to get cannabis delivered right to your door. Use that code ColeMemo15, and we will see you on the next episode. We got some good ones lined up next week. Somebody called Bo Whitney might be on the show. We might also have Jim Higdon from Cornbread Hemp and other guests we've got lined up. It's going to be pretty awesome next few episodes. So stay tuned for those, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, folks.